On the map of the Middle East, Oman looks unassuming. There are no skyscrapers like in Dubai, no giant megaprojects like NEOM, none of the ostentatious power that Riyadh and Abu Dhabi like to display. And yet it is Oman that has become one of the most strategic points in the game. China is playing on the Arabian Peninsula. Not because it is rich, not because it is militarily strong, but because it keeps quiet, watches and does things its own way. Beijing understands the value of silence perfectly. Where others build empires in the spotlight, China builds its own in the shadows, slowly, patiently, step by step, and it is in that shadow that it found Oman. The port of Duqm, lying on the country's eastern coast, looks like something from another world. A few decades ago there was nothing here, only desert and ocean. Today, Chinese cranes, industrial halls, and container ships arriving straight from Shanghai stand in Duqm. It is a quiet pearl of the Belt and Road Initiative, a port located outside the Strait of Hormuz, far from the rivalry between Iran and the United States, in a place that gives China what it values most: stability. Oman has no great power ambitions. It doesn't seek dominance. It doesn't meddle in the wars of its neighbors. In a world that seethes, Oman resembles an island of calm, something like the Switzerland of the Gulf. And that is precisely what makes it so valuable to Beijing. While Riyadh invests in drones and sports, and Dubai in data clouds and tourism, Oman invests in something far more precious: trust. It is a country that does not betray its partners, does not change its mind every season, and does not wage media wars. In Beijing, they understand this and appreciate it more than any other nation. That is why Duqm is not just a port. It is a laboratory of the future, a model of cooperation without shouting, propaganda, or haste. There are only investments, patience, and a long-term vision. The Chinese brought technology, capital, and know-how to Oman. The Omanis offered peace, space, and time in return. It's an exchange the West cannot understand, because it doesn't fit into its political logic. Oman has become one of the few countries that has entered China's orbit of influence without losing its own identity. You don't see Chinese military bases or aggressive propaganda here. Instead, there is a port where containers with Chinese characters stand alongside fishermen's boats. At first glance, nothing special. But if you look from a satellite, Duqm is a key point connecting Asia, Africa, and the Gulf. From here, ships can sail in any direction, to India, Egypt, Tanzania, or Europe. It is a logistical crossroads of the world that few people talk about, but which may decide the region's future. Oman doesn't need advertising. Its strength lies precisely in the fact that no one suspects it of great ambition. And that is when you can achieve the most. That's why, while Dubai glitters, Riyadh reforms itself, and Tehran threatens, Oman is doing something far wiser. It opens a port, waits and watches as the world comes to its gates on its own. And it is in this silence that power is born. Just 20 years ago, no one would have been able to point to Duqm on a map. There were no paved roads leading there, no infrastructure, nothing but desert, ocean, and a few fishing villages. Today, Duqm is one of the most ambitious port projects in the world, a symbol of a new era for Oman and a strategic pillar of China's Belt and Road Initiative. The port was built in a location that, from a military and logistical standpoint, is almost ideal. It lies outside the Strait of Hormuz, that narrow choke point through which around 20% of the world's oil passes every day. Any tension between Iran and the United States instantly turns Hormuz into a powder keg. Duqm, by contrast, is quietly located on the open Indian Ocean, within reach of the main trade routes, but beyond the immediate range of geopolitical storms. The Chinese saw the potential in this place before anyone else in the region understood its significance. In 2016, an agreement was signed to create the China-Oman Industrial Park Duqm, worth over $10 billion. In practice, this is not just a port, but a whole special economic zone, with factories, warehouses, a power plant, LNG terminals, and logistics infrastructure. Chinese companies, from China Harbor Engineering Company to Wanfeng Oman, began building the port, refinery, and industrial base. The plans included everything, from steel production to raw material processing, from logistics to renewable energy. In a short time, Duqm gained infrastructure that many Gulf states dream of, but which here is being built quietly, without media spectacles. Oman gained a partner who not only invested, but also taught it how to think long-term. The Chinese did not come with a ready-made recipe. Together with the Omani government, they designed a system for managing the port and economic zone in which every decision has a time horizon of at least 20-30 years. Unlike Dubai, which lives on quick profit and a dynamic market, Oman builds its wealth like a fortress, stone by stone. Duqm is also a multi-layered port. Its deep water allows it to handle the largest ships in the world, but its hinterland is more than just terminals. Factories for solar panels, fertilizer plants, an oil and gas transshipment center, and even a research facility on water management in arid regions are being built there. Each of these elements fits into China's plan to build a network of green industrial zones along the new Silk Road. From Beijing's point of view, Duqm has one more unique value. It allows China to bypass potential blockades in the Persian Gulf. If a conflict ever paralyzed Hormuz, Chinese ships could head to Duqm, where infrastructure is ready to take over part of the cargo from Jebel Ali or Kuwait. In this way, Oman becomes China's logistical insurance policy in the region, a quiet alternative to the noisy power of its neighbors. But Duqm is not only a port and industry, it is a symbol of the transformation of the entire Oman, which is turning from an oil-based country into a logistics and manufacturing hub for the region. While the UAE and Saudi Arabia try to attract global attention with flashy projects, Oman has chosen a different path, less spectacular, but more stable. It's a strategy that fits perfectly into China's development philosophy: patience instead of haste, consistency instead of revolution. Nothing in Duqm is accidental. Every kilometer of road, every dock, every fuel tank is part of a bigger puzzle, a global route that begins in China and ends in Europe. And Oman is in the middle of it, not to rule, but to lead through calm. Duqm doesn't need advertising. Its cranes and containers speak for themselves. In the port where fishermen's tents once stood, ships from Hong Kong, Singapore, and Guangzhou now dock. And in the port offices, Omani officials and Chinese engineers sit at the same table, planning a future in which Oman will become a bridge between Asia, Africa, and the Arab world. Duqm was born out of nothing, but in that nothingness, China saw the future. And perhaps that is why a port that emerged in silence may one day prove to be one of the loudest places on the world map. Oman has never been a country chasing the fashions of globalization. Unlike its neighbors in Dubai or Riyadh, it never raced to build the tallest skyscraper, the largest shopping mall, or the loudest reform. Its strength has always been restraint, the same restraint that has made it one of the most stable states in the region today. And it is precisely this stability that convinced China to invest not only money here, but also trust. For Beijing, Oman is a laboratory for a model of cooperation different from that used in Africa or Central Asia. It is not about brutal economic expansion or grabbing resources, but about jointly building infrastructure that is meant to last for decades. In Duqm and other parts of the country, Chinese companies act not as dominant investors, but as architects of development. They offer technology, financing, and long-term planning. The Omanis provide land, law, and the local context. The key element of this plan is the China-Oman Industrial Park, Duqm, which is not just a cluster of halls and warehouses, but an entire economic ecosystem. Steel plants, factories for electrical equipment, fuel terminals, and modern energy laboratories are being built here. Each of these projects carries a characteristic Chinese trait: balanced engineering and pragmatism, focused not on impressing the world, but on effectiveness. Interestingly, Duqm has also become a symbol of Chinese soft power. Chinese engineers live in the same town as local workers. They learn Arabic, participate in Omani holidays, and in return pass on technological expertise. In relations with Oman, there is none of the colonial tone that accompanies many investments in Africa. Instead of dominance, partnership. Instead of haste, Patience. Chinese investments are not limited to the port. In Salalah, the country's second-largest city, a new container terminal is being built with co-financing from Asian development funds. In Muscat, Chinese companies are developing energy infrastructure, including solar power plants and transmission networks. In Nizwa, pilot education programs run by Chinese technical universities in cooperation with Omani institutions are being tested. It is this diversity that gives Sino-Omani cooperation a systemic character. It is not one mega project, but a network of economic and social ties that reinforce one another. Omanis gain jobs and infrastructure. China. Access to a strategic location and a reputation as a partner who does not impose its will. You cannot understand this model without one word: trust. In a region where alliances often change from one day to the next, Oman has for decades pursued a consistent, measured foreign policy. It maintains good relations with the US, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and, increasingly, China. It does not engage in wars, does not enter military blocs, does not risk confrontation. Such neutrality is priceless for Beijing, which needs stable partners to ensure its regional infrastructure can operate without disruption. As a result, Oman has become a showcase state that China points to as proof that cooperation without interference works. There are no mass protests against investors here, no anti-Chinese sentiment, no political pressure. Chinese companies pay taxes, hire local workers, and respect local law. For Beijing, this is proof that influence can be built without aggression, that quiet and loyalty can yield more than hard power. From Oman's perspective, this cooperation is also a form of insurance. In a world where Saudi Arabia and Iran constantly test the boundaries of their influence and the US loses interest in the region, China offers something that is in short supply: predictability. Capital flows in, infrastructure grows, and the country remains itself. And perhaps that is the secret of Oman's success. Where others try to rule the world, Oman is learning how to use it. Quietly, consistently, with the help of a partner who understands the value of patience. There is no glitter in this cooperation, but there is something more important: balance. And in a world losing itself in the noise of ambition, balance is the scarcest currency of all. When you look at a map of the Arabian Peninsula, you can see tension written into the geography. To the north, Iran, ready at any moment to block the Strait of Hormuz. To the west, Saudi Arabia, full of ambition and plans for Gulf dominance. To the east, the Emirates, rich and loud, fighting for global attention. And in between, Oman, quiet, calm, like a neutral island between stormy seas. This silence, however, comes at a price. For decades, Oman has balanced between powers, trying not to fall into the orbit of any one of them. This balancing act is an art neither Riyadh nor Tehran has mastered. Oman maintains diplomatic relations with Iran, the United States, Saudi Arabia, and China simultaneously. To the outside world, this looks like a diplomatic miracle. To Beijing, like strategic gold. Because Oman is the only country in the region that can talk to everyone. When Iran is under sanctions, communication channels often run through Oman. When the US looks for a quiet intermediary in talks with Tehran, it turns to Muscat. And when China needs a stable foothold for its Belt and Road Initiative, Oman is the only truly safe option. A state with no enemies that also has access to the ocean. That is why Duqm and its surroundings have become a playing field for three powers. The Americans maintain access to Omani military infrastructure, including airports and ports, under a 2019 agreement. Their goal is to secure a Plan B in case of crisis in the Gulf. At the same time, the Chinese invest in civilian infrastructure, ports, roads, factories, and Iran, though keeping its distance, watches all this with suspicion, realizing that Duqm may eventually become an alternative to its own ports in Bandar Abbas. Beijing, however, avoids open confrontation. Its strategy is based on presence without provocation. There are no Chinese bases, radars, or naval ships in Oman. There is logistics, transport, and trade. everything that can be classified as civilian. In practice, this means China gains strategic points without crossing the red lines that would alarm Washington. For the US, Oman is a convenient paradox, an ally that is not a vassal. The Americans know Muscat will not be dragged into military adventures, but they also value its loyalty on security matters. Oman allows them to use its infrastructure, but retains full sovereignty. It is a model that Beijing watches with admiration, because it resembles China's own approach to the world: maximum gain with minimum exposure. Iran, meanwhile, treats Oman as a neighbor it needs, but would rather not provoke. For Tehran, Omani neutrality is a blessing. Oman does not support sanctions, does not join military coalitions, and has often served as a communication channel between Iran and the rest of the world. China, which has strong relations with Tehran, understands perfectly that its investments in Oman will not be seen as a provocation. It is a geopolitical balance that is hard to achieve anywhere else in the Middle East. In this configuration, Oman acts like a chess grandmaster. Every move is measured, every decision thought through. The Americans see in it a logistics partner, the Iranians, a safe neighbor, and the Chinese, a quiet port that can change the course of global trade. For each, Oman is something different, but for itself, it remains itself. And perhaps that is where its power lies. In a world where powers fight for influence, Oman proves that sometimes the best strategy is to endure in silence. Duqm, built from nothing, is becoming a stage where the ambitions of three powers meet, and none of them dares to make too abrupt a move. Because in this game, victory is decided not by force, but by patience. Oman is a mirror in which the entire Middle East is reflected, a region full of noise, emotion, and chaos. But in that mirror, you can also see something else, a reflection of a future in which calm can be as powerful as an army. On the streets of Muscat, the capital of Oman, you can still smell frankincense and sea salt. Men wear traditional dishdashas, white robes with decorative cords, and women cover their hair with colorful scarves that look more like works of art than symbols of obligation. In cafes where elderly Omanis sip cardamom coffee, conversations flow slowly in the rhythm of the desert sun. But a few kilometers away, in the offices of the Duqm port, you can already hear another language, the language of globalization, investment plans, and contracts signed in dollars, yuan, and rials. Oman is one of the last places in the Middle East where tradition and modernity do not fight each other, but live side by side. The Sultanate, which for centuries traded with India, Africa, and Persia, has learned that openness is not a threat, but a condition of survival. For the Chinese, it is an almost ideal country. It respects its own culture, but does not close its doors to the world. In Duqm, Salalah, and Muscat, modern technologies intertwine with the old rhythm of life. New districts rise beside old bazaars where frankincense, silver, and spices are sold. Chinese engineers learn local customs, while Omani workers learn how to operate automated terminals. In the port, you can see scenes that resemble a mosaic. On one side, a ship from Hong Kong unloads containers full of electronics. On the other, fishermen sell freshly caught tuna. And no one sees any contradiction in that. Unlike many of its neighbors, Oman does not try to imitate the West. It does not modernize for show. Modernity here has an organic character. It emerges from need, not from vanity. Sultan Haytham bin Tariq, who continues the policies of the late Sultan Qaboos, understands that the true strength of the country does not lie in skyscrapers or luxury districts, but in social stability and cultural identity. That is why in Oman, every new investment, even a Chinese one, must fit into that rhythm. It cannot disrupt it. It must complement it. The Chinese, contrary to stereotypes, have understood this very well. Their presence in Oman is subtle. No large billboards, no flags, no political gestures. In local media, you hardly hear about them. Yet it is in this silence that their effectiveness is visible. Beijing knows that Oman is not Dubai, where investments have to shine. Here, Every project has to look as if it were part of nature, as if it had been there forever. You can even see it in the architecture. Terminals in Dukum are built with sandy beige materials that blend into the surrounding landscape. Railway lines are planned so as not to disturb nature reserves. In new residential districts for industrial workers, elements of traditional Arab urban design have been included. Courtyards, arcades, low-rise buildings. It is a symbolic fusion of the old and the new, in which globalization does not destroy locality but becomes its extension. Oman sees modernity not as a threat, but as a tool for survival in a post-oil world. Although the country still earns from exporting raw materials, it has long been thinking about alternatives. It is developing solar energy, tourism, maritime transport, and light industry. All of this in a typically Omani tempo, calm, methodical, without revolutions. For China, this philosophy is close to its own strategic culture. Small steps, long planning, no emotion. Beijing respects Oman's pace because it understands that stability is worth more than quick profit. In this way, the two countries, so different in culture and history, meet at one point, in their belief that strength is born out of harmony. Today, Oman is not only China's quiet partner, but also a model of an alternative globalization, one that does not destroy tradition, but supports it. In Dukum, you won't find aggressive advertising or luxury malls. You will find something much more extraordinary. People who believe that the world can be changed without shouting, and perhaps that is why Oman is so important to Beijing. Because in an era when most of the world shouts about power, it shows that sometimes you can build the most when you speak in a whisper. Oman never tried to be the center of the world, yet today more and more routes lead to it. Dukum, not long ago a place at the end of the map, has become a point watched by both China and the United States. In an age of noisy reforms, media wars, and concrete-built power, Oman stands out because its strength comes from silence. While other Gulf countries race for global attention, Oman prefers to act quietly, signing agreements, expanding ports, building relationships. There are no spectacular inaugurations or propagandistic conferences. There is instead calm, stability, and patience, values that have become rare in the Middle East. For China, Oman is a partner who will not betray, will not disappoint, and will not vanish with the next political gust of wind. For the world, it is a reminder that power does not always shout. Sometimes it simply endures. Dukum does not shine like Dubai, does not inspire with futuristic visions like Neom, but it has something others lack: balance. Perhaps that is why China chose Oman, because it knows that in the global game for influence, you need someone who knows how to listen, not just speak. Dukum is not a port of the future. It is a port of patience, a symbol of a new kind of power, quiet, stable, and self-assured. In a world where everyone wants to dominate, Oman reminds us that you can simply exist and build everything on that.